Hello, peoples of the internet. Today we have another Stairway Mountain time trial with this beautiful Barstow Trans Am. Yeah, it really is a lovely car, and it makes 290 horsepower, thereabouts, and it weighs about 1650 kilograms. So, you know, the power to weight ratio isn't brilliant on this. But you can still get up some decent speeds round corners if only the brakes weren't so toasty. As you'll see on the chart on the left, they're very, very red. They're overheating, I mean, and this wasn't the days exactly of sumptuous brake cooling. So it's a struggle to get this thing stopped down the track. And unfortunately, even when you're trying to preserve the brakes early on, it does have the brakes die about this part of the track. I mean, they're not completely dead, but they just don't give you the kind of reassurance you would want from a high-performance vehicle. I mean, it's 60s hardware. It worked on the base model because you spent longer between the corners, so the brakes were less overworked. But in this, you're really working the brakes for all they're worth, and because it's got quite a powerful engine, it can get between the corners quite quickly. As you'll see here, it's very, very stable at speed for this era of vehicle. Very, very stable outwise. You can carry a good 90 miles per hour around some of the corners, 73 around that later corner, which is as good, I'd say, as the best we've seen here. Very, very impressive there. Probably because there's not huge wear tyres, it doesn't feel understeery, so I can just carry the speed. Yeah, it's not got so little grip you're going to slide off. Just the right amount of grip to carry speed around those corners. Here the brakes are really in the way. I mean, I won on the dirt banking stuff there and magically recover it. The suspension does get jiggly at times, so it's very, very soft. Not what you want in a race car by any means, but it is a road car, I believe, so yeah, that's kind of to be expected. As the brakes, again, struggle. You'll see a lot of these clips I've chosen because they just show how terrible the brakes get. They even look rusty on the chart, but they're not. It's like immaculate brakes. They're just not a good set of brakes. So 1960s hardware, not modern brakes, not modern performance brakes even. Over here, however, we can see it's surprisingly stable in the way only an American car can be. It doesn't get bounced around as some other vehicles might have, and it can carry the speed, although round here you hammer on the brakes because the brakes are so weak, so it looks like I might not be fully braking, but I am a lot of the time, and there I just avoid hitting a sign so I can get around the track because it's a large vehicle, you know, you could easily catch a tail or something on the side. And here we're struggling to drive it. I believe that crash broke the steering, but it did get to the end. And yeah, a nice classic vehicle, but not what I would recommend for track vehicle usage thing. Anyway, it's not that damaged actually. It looks like the suspension might have taken a beating, but the bodywork itself isn't as bad as it could have been, especially considering it took a hit at the end of a jump. Now the interior is fine until it decides the roof is just randomly going to start collapsing into the interior, as you'll see now. I think that's from when I tipped over on the roof trying to get the bonnet open, but yeah, I mean, they're not making those roofs out of very stiff metals, it just gives up eventually. Not what you really want in a performance car, especially not if you roll it. Now, here we have the Roma Super Sport. It has a very interesting engine. It's a 707 horsepower engine out of a Dodge Hellcat. So it's a lot of power in this vehicle, although it weighs 1430-ish kilograms, so it's not light. It's heavier than I thought it would be, really. But it's such good fun to drive. I mean, it will tip over, you know, if you go up the curb round a corner. It will tip, and that's not fun. But it's just so bouncy and wobbly that when you load it with this much power, it's such good fun to just throw it round corners, even if you do feel likely to tip it over like such. And I kept going in this particular case. I believe it was the only one I did keep going on after rolling it onto the side. So yeah, it's quite a tough vehicle, you know, and it puts up with that kind of thing. It's always struck me though as a kind of more modern, more usable version of the Barstow, as I get a bit messy up there. And I say that because the brakes feel stronger. They're still not perfect brakes. They do get a little hot down the one, but they're better than the Barstow, and it generally has better grip out of corners thanks to its all-wheel drive system. Or is it four-wheel drive? Whatever it's got, it gives it grip. And here we'll see the suspension is actually excellent at handling bumps. I mean, it's going 100 here, so it's as quick as the Barstow for the most part, and I can just fly over that and it just forgives you. It wants to hug you, this car. It doesn't want to punish you aggressively. That's what makes it so fun. It's just such a friendly car. You'd think it would be intimidating being so powerful and so heavy, but it simply isn't. Even though it's, what, 900, 800 kilos heavier than the Barstow, and they're a rack of war, but as I said, it's a tough vehicle, so even with me making driver mistakes, it just puts up with it, which is great, really, from any car. And the brakes, yeah, they're not perfect, but you'll see a bit better than the Barstow. Into here, we can kind of get it stopped. Actually, a very similar hit to the Barstow around there. And yeah, overall, a great car to drive. The only hazard actually is tipping it over. I mean, again, we have the American car thing. Wonderfully, it doesn't get messed up by these huge jumps here. It just copes with them, as the smoothness of the suspension is excellent despite being nothing fancy. It's kind of a primitive joy. I mean, you don't want to drive this fast, you just forget about driving it fast. Instead, you want to have fun driving it, and that's always a good thing to have from a vehicle, you know, even if it's not the quickest vehicle in the game, just the fact that you can have great fun driving it. Round here, yeah, I take a bit of a shortcut, somehow don't tip it over after that. And over here, yeah, I just have to lift off a bit and it gets around there just fine. I believe the steering's a bit bent up, but it's generally a fairly stable vehicle for what it is, running on the banking there. And yeah, as I would, I made a mistake. You know, I'm far from a perfect driver, I'm far from even a good driver, but it did make it to the end, you know, and the suspension took the jump quite nicely over there. So, you know, it's a good vehicle in general. Also, the ABS helped under braking, made it so you could turn into corners while braking, as opposed to just grinding to a halt. The interior was pretty much immaculate other than the windscreen and the door plastics. A nice interior as well, much nicer than the Barstow, I would say, in certain places. And yes, here we have something that's a lot more premium looking. It's a European car, an ETK I-Series. This particular version being the 2400i TT Sport Evolution, only it's a two-door variant, which is, I believe, from the Variety mod, and it's a little lighter than the four-door that comes with the game as standard. Now this is the all-wheel drive one. I very briefly used the rear-wheel drive one and it didn't seem to grip as I would like it to, so I decided to go with the all-wheel drive one. It just seemed that bit more potential around the corners, that bit more grippy. And it could tip over if you're being stupid. Plus we have the virtues of a stiffly sprung sports car. But you know, overall, just driving it as you should, it's a good vehicle, and this actually feels like it's got performance brakes. I mean, it probably helps that it's only 1430 kilograms, which is, what, a lot less than the Roma, as much as a ton even less than the Roma. So yeah, it's an easier vehicle to handle. It does have a lot of understeer though. As you'll see, I can't carry the same kind of speed, and it does get very squirrely. The American cars didn't do that. This doesn't. I'm guessing it's a combination of the aerodynamics being imperfect and the fact that it's a smaller, lighter vehicle. So it's not got aerodynamics nor just loads of weight to hold it down like those cars have. The engine's actually a little wheezy. 351 horsepower. I mean, that's weak. Really more than the Barstow, yes, but this thing could handle more power. It could probably handle 450 if I wanted it to. But this is what it ships with, so this is what I'm using. And around corners and braking, other than the understeer, it handles well. It's just a nice handling car. The suspension is firm yet fair. It's not going to be as refined as the American vehicles, as we'll see here, but it just does a good job. You get the feeling it's not going to be the most sophisticated suspension either, but it just does a good job of stabilising the vehicle on there, and it just works. Now, it's a nice vehicle to drive, really. There's not more I can say. You can pick up some decent speed, and it will sometimes get out of hand like that, but generally it's pretty compliant, pretty nice to you, as long as you don't try and go extremely quick round corners where the car just loses its mind and tries to go crazy. But, you know, I found it to be nice to drive, and it's quicker than either the Barstow or the Roma Supersport. It actually set a 7-minute 18.37 time, very quick, and it's not actually that beaten up. It was the end jump that did most of the damage here, and the doors, oddly enough, actually took some of the abuse for the chassis, as you can see now. It's the first time I've seen that on a car though, where the doors seem to actually take the bumps instead of the actual bodywork or the suspension taking it. Very odd feature we've got there. As you can see, the doors bend inwards on the interior. Now, here we have another ETK. I mean, yeah, it seems suspiciously like I've sorted this by manufacturer, doesn't it? Although, it's not the case. I've sorted it by speed. And this is quicker still than the 2400 TT Sport Evolution. It's probably in large part due to having 950 horsepower. Now this is still a very understeery car. I believe even a little more understeery than the 2400i, but it's got more weight to haul, and the tyres, well, they're constantly having a tantrum and wanting to go on strike because they're not happy with how they're being treated. But you know, it's got the power to pull itself along, and it's not near as heavy as the Roma again, and it's still a bit lighter than the Barstow while having all this power, and it's got all-wheel drive to put it down. This particular version is the KC12ZR, and it's got an automatic transmission. They only come with automatics, probably because manual would be too much to handle with all this speed or something, I don't know. And the car's nice other than the understeer. It's actually also surprisingly stable here. It could be to do with having that V12 over the front axle to stabilise it. Twin turbocharged in this case. And that could be what's giving it the stability, that it's not got some light 2.4 litre inline 6 like the other vehicle, 2400i. And yeah, it's perhaps not my choice of track vehicle, mainly because the 2400i looks a lot cooler, and it's quick though. If you like Japanese, German sports cars, took me a while to realise it was German, it's a very good track weapon actually, and one you can get a lot of speed out of. It does have a tendency to lose its wheels though if you're not careful, if you hit a wall at the wrong point or something. That surprised me. Now, another reason I would choose the 2400i is the interior. This is just a sea of plastic. It's so dull. Like, you're spending loads of money on an expensive performance car. Surely you deserve something better than this. Like, I'm sure it's well made and everything, as it bounced there. It's no longer an American car. It's just a bit dull, you know. It's not a bad car by any means. quick but dull is probably the best way to sum it up. It's more than 2.5 times more powerful than the I-Series though, and the fact that it's only within 3 seconds of it, it doesn't say much. I think the 2400i is just a better tuned vehicle than this, because although this is dead quick, it just doesn't really show as you would want it to for such a powerful modern vehicle. The 2400i has little power, but it executes it so well to get a very good time. And yeah, I've lost one of my wheels here. Surprisingly enough, only one of my wheels. And it lost the bumps and stuff. It's a complete wreck, but the interior survived. I guess that shows how well modern cars roll. You know, the drivers are generally protected, only the seatbelts would have to be pretty good to hold them in properly, but the interior survived, and you would perhaps survive that crash better than you might with an I-Series, because the interior is just more solid. Now here we have a handful, as you might notice there. I kind of managed to drift it out, and it's a hard car to drive this. It's actually an SBR4 hill climb vehicle. I added vehicle on the end, but it's a nice vehicle to drive in no one's mind, because it's just difficult. It feels like it's got too much power for it to control, and then there's the aero. You snap the aero off and it does lose its balance if you snap the front or rear aero off. Well, what little balance it had to begin with. Now, it's got 800-ish horsepower and it weighs 1480 kilograms, and the power to weight ratio here is brilliant. But you just can't really carry the speed as you would like. It's probably partially to do with the rear engine layout. Far too much weight on the rear axle, and it just doesn't go as I would really like it to go. It can snap on you and lose control very, very easily. As you'll see there, it just snapped straight. It didn't want to go around the corner. It probably is now that ABS is disabled from default here, and I've not bothered to re-enable it because I generally use them as they come. Although I have turned stability control off. I don't believe this handles much better with stability control, to be honest. The awkward weight balance also seems to make it lose control at these kinds of speeds. Even with the aero kit, it just doesn't hold itself down round corners as you would like it to. I mean, 100 miles per hour and it begins to become so dangerous, and you don't really want to drive it like that. If you do, you'll probably end up with a wreck of a car on the side of the track. Now, I do manage to somehow keep it on the track there. I'm slightly damaging the front aero back there, as my mind puts words together very slowly. And yeah, this wasn't the final one in it, but the first time I got just didn't record, so I've had to do it again. I mean, you'll see I have the odd off, but it's because it's so hard to control, and I mean, there's no hiding it. That's just the truth about this vehicle. It's hard to keep it in line, really, as you'd want it to. It's a bit of a rebel to your instructions, even, you could say. Although it was surprisingly stable over those sharp bumps. That surprised me. And yeah, it can go round corners, but there's always the risk of just the car snapping, the car deciding it's not happy with braking into that corner and rebelling against your instructions and just braking to go off-road and stuff. That happened a lot of the time. Like, everything feels like it's going well, you feel like you've got it under control, and then it just snaps on you and does something crazy, and that's not what I want my cars to handle like. I like my cars to be predictable. Really much like the 2400i, only with less understeer. That's kind of my ideal car. And I did lose the side lip thing on the front there. It was a shame, because this was the only one I actually got to the end with the aero on. It was only one of 2 ones I even got to the end with this vehicle. And yeah, the first one I just managed to get it to the end without aero because it would have been too hard to try and do it with it on, really. It survived, you know, the general chassis and stuff. It's quite stiff, but clearly it didn't turn it into the performance rocket I would have liked it to be. The SBR4 is still a handful, even in hill climb trim. Now here we have another Hirochi. Yes, I have two SBR4s of the days, and this one is quicker. The hill climb did a 7 minute 10, this one did a 7 minute 9 time. You may ask, how is the hill climb version beaten by a regular SBR4? Well, that's because this is no regular SBR4. Whereas the hill climb version had about 800 horsepower, this has 1168 horsepower, because it's called the Godzilla. It's also 1488 kilograms. I'm not quite sure how a stripped out race SBR4 can weigh only 8 kilograms lighter than a standard road going one, but there you go. I guess those roll cages are just heavy. Now, this thing is very, very quick. As you'll see here, I can floor it and it picks up speed like nothing else thanks to that almost 1200 horsepower flat 8 engine in the rear. But round the corners you can't apply the power that well. Although it's okay, because being unable to apply the power with this car actually gives you a kind of advantage of being able to ride the turbo lag, and you don't really have the power instantly kicking in like you did with a hill climb. If the power kicks in with this thing, you generally accelerating. So as long as you ride the turbo lag and don't just accelerate full boost around corners, it's generally a fairly stable vehicle, just because you're probably running about 300 horsepower or something ridiculously low without it, which a car can actually handle. Now, you know, it's a very, very quick car though, and it's nicer than hill climb driver, I would say, because of a turbo lag. I mean, it's rare you would look to the turbo lag as a good point, but in this particular case, it's that rare moment where it is. I mean, as you'll see here, it's probably the quickest car we've had here. I believe it hit 128, 129 miles per hour up there. Just because it's got the power when you need it. It's on-demand power. You ask it for the power and it gives it. Now, electronic stability may help smoothen out the difference between the stable, controllable lag and the boost. That may be stabled out if you have ESC on, but I'm not allowed to use it because it's against my own rules, so I don't. You know, it's also got some interesting vents on the dashboard. I believe they're made of a different material or something than the standard ones. I like that attention to detail there. It's a nice feature. Now, I got it to the end eventually. This was in much nicer condition than the hill climb one, I would say, because, you know, the lag makes it controllable. And I lose a wheel. And somehow the bonnet managed to intersect itself in that weird area. I'm not sure how it did that. It's a very skillful bonnet to do that, but, you know, it was a wreck when it crossed the line, but all the high power cars basically disintegrate themselves when they go across the line. It's not something I get, it's just something that happens. And that's the way it is, you know. The interior was a bit of a wreck. The driver would probably have survived, but it just didn't seem that stable on the pillars. But then they are skinnier pillars, so it does increase visibility, so there's two sides there. Now, here we have another hill climb vehicle. It's the Pessima hill climb from the 1980s. It's got 525-ish bhp and it weighs 1405 kilograms. So immediately you'll see a contrast between the SBR4s, which were just using brutal power to go quick, to a car that's not so much powerful but very, very grippy round the corners. I mean, it's a lovely, lovely vehicle to drive. The only problem is you just want to take more and more speed, and you often end up pushing the car beyond its own limits. Although the controllability is definitely worth something, because I found this quicker than the SBR4 hill climb's quickest time with this secondary lap I just threw together, because the original one didn't really record, annoyingly. And you'll see it's actually fairly quick in straight lines as well, because you can carry the speed through the corners. So even though the power isn't that impressive, you can just get round the corner and get the power down, and it's generally more controllable like that. Like you saw with the Monster SBR4, that struggled to brake. This, I can just drive it all the way along the straight and then brake. I don't have to brake because it's losing control of itself. And yeah, it's generally pretty good along here as well. The downforce works pretty well at holding this thing down. It definitely drives a lot better than the custom I drove round a while ago, as I somehow keep it on the road. You know, you have to limit your speed with this, so you try and go too fast, you go beyond the limits of the car, as I said before, and you end up crashing quite badly. There it was just a bit of a jolt and stuff, and I get back onto the road and continue, but before it wasn't always that way, annoyingly. So, you'll see, it's a great vehicle to drive, really. There's a little turbo lag, but really once you're going you don't notice that, because you can use the higher revs all the time. The SBR4 Monster you had to go below the lag. This you can constantly be above the lag, because although it's not got the most power, it's got power that you can use, power that you can control. And I'm really not doing it justice with my driving, because the places going wrong are really where I'm just being stupid. It's a good car to drive, and in the right hands it can be incredibly quick, I would imagine. But even in hands that aren't the right hands, even in my hands, I set an incredible time. It's actually 6 minutes 54.17. Would you believe it? It's an under 7 minute car. I didn't think I would ever see that grace my leaderboard, but boy has it happened. And I'm just so happy about this, you know. It challenges what I thought was possible, and that's no bad thing. It also has some very grippy tyres, as you can see, and maybe can't see, but they do a good job. They're a good part of the tune. The suspension, again, it's a kind of 2400i firm but fair setup. It's maybe not the most comfortable suspension in the world, but it just works with the track. It works at finding grip and stuff. Now, here we'll see, it was surprisingly not as ruined as you might expect over the finish line. Some cars have been a lot more ruined because they've lost wheels and stuff. The wheels are on the car, in whichever state it might be. There's a 4-cylinder engine, and here we have not much in the interior to keep it lightweight. You know, it's quite a lightweight car, 1405 kilograms, and fancy aero, which does work and does hold it down at speed. The only trouble is the understeer, really, but even so, that's remarkably well kept. Now, here we've moved on to the Sunburst hill climb, and this thing is quick, you know. It does have some notable understeer, but it's just so stable. It's got the stability I would really want from a car. It just doesn't want to have a weird break out unpredictably on you. It means you know what you're doing, and it means you constantly know what the car's doing. You know where it is, and you know it's a good obedient designed car. It's not designed to be snappy, and it's not like the Rover that's meant to be fun. It's fun in its own way of just how crazy fast you can get this. The first time I drove it, even, actually my fastest time I drove it, completely down the hill, it set a small miracle of a 6 minute 41.09 time. And I can say confidently, I don't think anything in a while is going to be able to beat that, unless the developer brings out a hill climb car based on the ETK800 or something crazy. But even so, they're heavier than these, so it's hard to see them doing better. Because this is a light car, 1390 kilograms. Weirdly, for a modern car, it's actually 15 kilograms lighter than the old model. It also has 610 plus horsepower, somewhere around there. And it does show, though, this is more controllable than the Pessima. and it has more power, and that's really what gives it the speed. It's not just that it's a more powerful car, quicker in a straight line, but it has that cornering grip that you really want. I mean, it always felt nice to drive, but it never felt truly quick in my book here when I first drove it. I never realised just how quick it was. It just stuck out to me how nice it was, and that clearly transferred into speed. Because, you know, it's a lovely vehicle. The suspension isn't perfect. It's again that firm but fair kind of feeling. It's got stiff, racy suspension, and it does its job well. It's not exactly going to be the most comfortable car in the world, but as you'll see here, I can pick up 132. That's more than the 1200 horsepower SBR4 Monster could do, and that's in a car with a mere 610 horsepower. We speak comparatively, of course, and, you know, it really proves when you design a car for this kind of purpose, and you design it well, you can really get crazy times from it. Here we'll see it's pretty good over here, generally. It does get a bit bobbly, but I managed to save it. The grip's there, you see. It doesn't feel like a car that will ever betray you. It's always there for you. And that's a good thing, because I like it. The brakes also, they're up to the job. We have no Barso style brake problems, and we've kind of gone to the complete opposite end of the spectrum in this video. We've gone from a car that isn't hugely quick, comparatively of course, to something that's incredibly quick, and actually nicer to drive as well, I would say. But to be fair, it's a modern car. You know, engineering's improved that much and stuff. Over the line, yeah, it gets a bit beaten up. More so than the Passima. And I lose my front aero. The front aero doesn't get in the way as much as it does with other vehicles on here, just because it's such a nice vehicle to drive. You don't find you're scraping it on things as much, just because it's so tractable, so easy to keep under control. So yes, it's a sea of plastic as always in these dash layouts and things, but it works, you know. There's actually door panel trim, which is odd. The Passima didn't have that. I'd think they'd remove it for weight saving, but I guess not. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, a goodbye everybody, until another day.